Welcome to COVID-19 vaccines, what you should know, a very important and timely topic. My name is Russell Best. I'm the Executive Director of Alumni and Donor Experience Constituent Engagement for the Alumni Association at UC. Thank you very much for joining us today. A few housekeeping items here before we begin our program with our moderator and panelists. Please know that this is being recorded. There was already one question in the chat. Yes, we will record this program, and then post-event, we will email out a link to the recording, and we will share it through our social media channels for the Alumni Association and through UC Health. All participants are muted, and your video is disabled. You likely noticed that, but just reassuring you that should be the case. It may also look like that you are the only participant along with the speakers. That's not the case either. We have a few hundred that have dialed in, but just with the settings for this WebEx event, you're only able to view the Q&A box and our speakers. If you just joined, please note that the audio can take a couple of minutes to connect. When we begin the Q&A portion of the program, you're encouraged to type and send questions in the Q&A box that should be visible to you. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And if you need more help tech troubleshooting, please reach out to Lori McDermott. Her contact information should be in your confirmation email, which you received after you registered. I'm now pleased to introduce our moderator, Dr. Christopher Lewis, UC's Vice Provost for Academic Programs.
Thank you, Russell, and welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to interact with the Alumni Association again. I myself an alum from the College of Medicine class of 2000. Yeah, let's have it up for the class of 2000. But literally, I'm very excited to be here and delighted to moderate this discussion of some really, really smart people on one of the hottest topics in the country right now, the COVID-19 vaccine. We are pleased to be joined by some real experts who don't just talk the talk, but they walk the walk. These are folks who have rolled up their sleeves figuratively and literally on this vaccine work, and we just couldn't be prouder of our UC and UC Health folks that are joining us today. I'd like to introduce everybody to the panel, starting with the illustrious Dr. Carl J. Fichtenbaum. Many of you have already seen him on TV urging people to participate in the trials. Well, he had very successful work on the trials. He's a professor of clinical medicine in the Division of Infectious Disease at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. He was the principal investigator for the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine trial at UC and UC Health. Unfortunately, he hails from Yale University during residency. I'm a Harvard guy, so I'll just say go Crimson. But jokes aside, Dr. Fichtenbaum, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to your expertise. We're also joined by Dr. Robert W. Frank, Jr. He's an MD and a professor of pediatrics in the infectious disease division at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and was the principal investigator for Pfizer and AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines at Cincinnati Children's. In addition to his illustrious career at Children's and as a physician, he's also spent 27 years in the Navy, so thank you for your service, sir. We also are joined by Dr. Sharice Wood, MD, who's a UC Health combined internal medicine and pediatrics physician, an associate professor of medicine. Most importantly, she really was the one who rolled up her sleeves, literally, and participated in the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine trial at UC and UC Health. So she was one of the first folks out to show people the importance of doing this and not just talking the talk. Lastly, we're going to have Kelly Martin from Communications at UC Health round out some slides. She'll bring us home with that. And I know we are eager to hear about the vaccine, so I'm going to zip my lip and pass it to the team. Team, again, thank you very much. And at the end of this discussion, we'll have a lot of time for some Q&A. So Drs. Fichtenbaum, Frank, and Wood, please take us away.
So I think the first thing really to start off with is, while we're waiting for everybody to get vaccinated, and that's going to be the long-term goal, as far as for people to remember that there are effective measures that we can do now. And that if you keep a safe distance of a separation of at least 3 feet, and if you get 6 feet, that's great, that can decrease transmission of the virus by 82%. Face masks can decrease transmission by 85%, and eye protection decreases transmission by 75%. Now, these are things that we're going to need to do for a while, that even after everybody starts getting vaccine, I'm still expecting that we're going to need these protection measures for at least another few months. So get used to your mask for a bit, but they will be not forever. And that now we can go to the next slide. So one of the things people have asked as far as like, how did we get to go so quickly with the COVID-19 vaccines? And so this slide is really looking at a typical development process for vaccines from pre-clinical or exploratory all the way through approval and manufacture, taking oftentimes a decade or more. And that obviously that's not what happened with this vaccine. So go to the next slide and we can talk a little bit about this vaccine. So the exploratory preclinical was world, we have a vaccine, we have a virus, and we need to get rid of this. So that was our exploratory. We got dropped, this virus got dropped on the world, and now we had to deal with it. But the amazing advances in science over the last decades has allowed us to sequence the virus and to find out which each piece of the virus genome did, so we could find targets for vaccines. And we were able to do that very quickly. So we first were able to sequence the virus in January of 2020, and by March 2020, we had a vaccine that we were starting to test. So that's really phenomenal, and it's really based on the science that we've had. The other thing that helped is that that the SARS-CoV-2 is called that because it's a very close variant to SARS, which was a severe acute respiratory distress syndrome, another coronavirus that hit pretty hard into Canada a number of years ago. So we did have data about coronaviruses. We weren't starting from ground zero about vaccines. And the other thing is that with the vaccine, for the Oxford vaccine, is that they had been working on that for pandemic really control. That was the whole purpose of that vaccine. And they had already tested it on Ebola, so that we had a lot of these things in our armamentarium and allowed us to be able to use them rather quickly. So that, and then over the last 10 months or so, of the amount of person power that has been put to testing this vaccine and approval, it's not that we've cut any corners, it's just that we've compressed things. And so just to give you an idea, is typically when we're doing a clinical trial, we may submit our samples every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. Here we were asked to sending in things 3 times a week. When there's a query, a question about some data point, usually we have a week to turn that around. We're given 24 hours now to be able to turn that around. So that's where we're compressing things. And the other thing as far as the FDA, so the Food and Drug Administration, that's the group that gives the final approval for a vaccine, typically gets all the data after all the clinical trials are completed. And that's why on that previous slide, you would see that there's oftentimes a 1 to 2 year process that the FDA has the data before they make a recommendation. But in this situation, what's been happening is that they've been getting the data almost in real time so that they were able to review it and as they got it, and that allowed them to give their recommendations much quicker. Next slide. So just as a bit of an overview of vaccines in general, there's right now over 150 vaccines in development and 61 vaccines for COVID in clinical trials. That there's 4 main platforms. The ones that we're testing in the United States are an mRNA vaccine, a viral vectored vaccine, a recombinant protein with adjuvant vaccine, which is very similar to what we typically think of as a flu vaccine, and then a live attenuated, where they've taken the COVID virus and they've weakened it and then using it as a vaccine. We're not using live attenuated in the United States, but other countries have tested and they've had development of successful vaccines there. Next slide. So this slide is just to give you a bit of an overview about how an mRNA vaccine works. And so unfortunately, I don't have control of the slide, so I really can't point it out. But if you look at the far left where it says the red, that's the cartoon of the virus. And that outside protein, that's the spike protein. And that's what we're making, there you go, that's what we're making our antibodies against. Because what that happens, that spike protein is what adheres, what attaches to our cells, and that's what allows the virus to get into us and then infect us. So what we're doing then in that middle slide, middle part of the slide, is we're taking the genetic material, the RNA, the mRNA, which stands for messenger RNA, for the spike protein, and then we're putting a lipid, so a fat particle around that, because that keeps the mRNA from being degraded, and that's our vaccine. And then we're injecting that into our muscle, and then our muscle uses our own cells. This is what a virus normally does. If a virus normally infects us, the virus uses our cellular machinery to grow. And so it uses what's called tRNA or transfer RNA to make the spike protein. And then in that far right side there, it's showing it's making that spike protein. It puts the spike protein on the outside of our cell. And then our cells is kind of like waving a flag to say, this is a foreign thing which we need to make an antibody to. And the antibodies are what we use to kill off a virus. And it also, the important thing is that it stimulates what's called our T cells, our thymic cells, which is a special kind of lymphocyte, which gives us more long-term memory. So the really exciting thing for both the mRNA vaccine and the viral vector vaccine, I'll show you in a second, is that it stimulates both a B, or the antibody response, and the T, or the cell response, which means it's a very robust, a very good immune response. Next slide. So this is the other vaccine that has been tested widely in the United States right now. So the Oxford or AstraZeneca vaccine, also the Janssen vaccine, some people are calling it Johnson & Johnson vaccine, are both using an adenovirus. And so what you're seeing here is that on the far right part of this slide, and if maybe Kelly's got it, there she goes, you're perfect. And that that's where, again, we're taking that spike protein from the SARS virus, and then we're putting it in, if you kind of go in the middle there, where it's the that kind of purplish thing with the spikes on it, there you go. That's the adenovirus, that we put the spike protein gene inside that adenovirus, and that is our vaccine. And now what we're doing is we're injecting that spike protein into us. So if you go down to like kind of lower, there you go. That's in the vaccine. That's injecting into us. And then that virus goes into, the adenovirus goes into our muscle, and it releases the spike protein gene. And then just like I was talking to you about with the mRNA vaccine, it makes the spike protein, puts it on the cell, and makes the immune response. One of the things important about the viral vector vaccines, these viruses cannot replicate in us. They do not grow in us, so it's not something that is a problem. They do not incorporate into our genome. They do not get into our DNA. Or they basically deliver the material to our bodies, and then they're done. Next slide. So quickly, just to give you some data on both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, and a little bit on the AstraZeneca. So for the Pfizer, as of November 13th, there have been 43,000 people enrolled in the United States. And then where the efficacy is looked at is 7 days after the second dose of vaccine. And that's really an important thing, is that emphasizing to people it's not that you can just get your first dose of vaccine and throw your mask away. You're still going to need these masks for a little bit, because that efficacy is looked at 7 days after the second dose. But the vaccine was shown to be 95% effective. And just to give you an idea what that means, out of the 170 cases of COVID that occurred in people that participated in the trial, 162 occurred in the placebo group. And 10 cases of severe disease, 9 of them were in the placebo group, which is really phenomenal. We were hoping to get an efficacy above 70%. So to get a 95%, to me, is kind of like hitting a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth inning of the seventh game to win the World Series. This is about as good as you can get. And then the other thing that's really, really important is the efficacy of the vaccine is consistent across the age groups, gender, race, ethnicity, so that it was 95% really across the board. And in adults 65 years of age and above, it was still 94%. So this is really, really good news. And next slide. So this is just for people who wanted to see the raw data a little bit more. This is on the vertical axis over where it says cumulative index. That's the percentage of people that were exposed to the virus. So we were thinking about 1% of people would be exposed to COVID during the 3 to 4 months after getting vaccine. In fact, in the placebo group, over 2.4% were infected, so that it was 2.5 times what we thought would be infection rate. And then across the horizontal axis is the days after dose 1. And so and then the bluish color on the top is the placebo group, and then the red one below that is the vaccine group. And so what you can see so for this trial, we gave a dose at day 0 and day 21, and you can see at about day 14 or so is when you start to get a separation between the placebo and the vaccine group. And that as you move out to the right, so further on in time, that separation between the vaccine and placebo group just keeps getting bigger and bigger. that insets graph there is giving a little bit of a blow up as far as to see what happens even as short as 12 days after the first dose, and that you're starting to see some separation between placebo and vaccine as early as 12 days after the first dose. So that while the efficacy is based on 2 doses, 7 days after that second dose, that you can see even a couple weeks after the first dose, we're starting to see protection, and that's about 50%. So it's not 94, but it's not 0. So that's really good. I mean, we're starting to see some protection even after the first dose. Next slide. So switching over to Moderna, very similar. So 30,000 people. The vaccine was really well tolerated, and Dr. Fichtenbaum will explain that to you a little more. And that the vaccine efficacy, again, was 94%. This is updated data from the paper that was just published in the New England Journal of Medicine on the 30th of December, that there were 204 cases of COVID, 192 in the placebo groups, only 12 in the vaccine group, and there were 30 cases of severe disease, all were in the placebo group. Next slide. So this is very similar to the representation I was showing you for the Pfizer. So this is for the Moderna vaccine, and that what we're seeing here is that, again, the cumulative exposure versus time, and that the 2 arrows there are at 0 and 28, because for the Moderna vaccine, they gave the 2 doses 28 days apart. And then you can see that you're starting to get that separation between the placebo, which is the top curve, and the vaccine, which is the bottom curve, again, somewhere around 15 days or so. And they were showing a similar kind of thing, around the 50% efficacy, even as early as a couple weeks after the first dose. But when you're looking at as the protocol was designed, which is 7 days after the second dose, again, the 94% efficacy, which is tremendous. Next slide. And so the last slide is just talking briefly about the AstraZeneca vaccine. And so that they've had, this is data that's been presented out of England, that the U.S. data still, we're just finishing up the study, so that those data will be available soon. But in the study in Great Britain, they've had 2,741 people. Unfortunately, they were supposed to get a bigger dose, that they got a half dose. And then they figured that out, and they gave them a full dose for the second dose. They had an efficacy around 90%. The rest of the group, so around about 9,000 people, got 2 full doses. They had an efficacy around 62%. We're still not sure exactly what that means. It's possible, actually, even though there's 62 and 90 look very different, when you're having a small number of outcomes, that those numbers may be fairly similar, and it's probably the number is is closer to about 80%. So what I would look at for all these vaccines, the 3 here, and I just don't have data yet on the Janssen vaccine because they haven't released it, is that all 3 vaccines I think we're going to have, and I think the 4th will be Janssen, have shown efficacy that exceeded what our hopes were, and that really far exceeded. So I think that this is our way out of the mess, and that I think that the vaccines that right now, and people are going to talk about later, as far as that the demand is exceeding supply, but that's going to be short term. And so actually my bigger concern, and one of the reasons why we're doing a lot of these presentations, is that I'm worried that people won't take the vaccine when they have it because of concerns. And so I will make myself available as far as if Kelly gets questions that I can't answer in time today. If people want to send them to me, I'm happy to answer the questions, because we need to get the right information out there so people will feel comfortable about getting the vaccine, because that's what we're going to need to get out of this. And with that, Carl, I think I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Bob. That was terrific. So one of the biggest questions that people have, of course, is what are the side effects of any vaccine? And so, of course, vaccines hurt when you give them. It's a shot. Most of them hurt for just a few seconds. And the big problems that we see with any of these kinds of vaccines are mostly pain at the site of where you have an injection. Sometimes there's a little redness, sometimes some swelling. And the most important thing to recognize is the reason why you have that pain in part is there is an immune response. The body is normally going to respond to anything that does not belong. It responds with various cells and signals. those kinds of cells and signals trigger all sorts of cascades of normal, healthy responses, and some of those things hurt. They cause pain. Some of our vaccines, of course, lead to people feeling bad. I'm sure all of us have had different kinds of vaccines as we were growing up. Some of us remember the childhood ones, some of us not so much. But sometimes you get fever and muscle aches, headaches. Again, these kinds of symptoms are because large part your immune system is creating a normal response. That response is meant to help protect us when we come in contact with that virus or that bacteria or germ again. That normal response triggers a cascade of signals that often send signals to our body to generate a fever, because when we heat ourselves up, that makes it harder for germs to survive in the body. And of course, it sends signals that send out all sorts of chemicals that sometimes makes our muscles ache or feel bad. So in many respects, when you have a response to a vaccine, either locally in your arm or generally in how you feel, that's kind of a signal that your immune system is reasonably healthy and doing a pretty good job. Now, some of the less common side effects that people often, they get a lot of news or a lot of press are, when the immune system itself may attack a person. And sometimes, we hear about a rare side effect. So if your immune system attacks your own body, everybody has heard about these kinds of diseases like lupus, not that vaccines give us that, but that this is as an example of the immune system attacking the body. But many times people will have a problem and it's just coincidence. But they oftentimes will point a finger saying, well, I got a vaccine 2 weeks ago. That must be the cause of my problem. So one of the hard parts about us doing studies and trying to figure out vaccines is trying to figure out where the side effects are. And it's important to have these kind of discussions to say, what do we know about the side effects and what we don't know? So if we can go to the next slide, I want to show you a little bit of data from the actual studies themselves. So this is the Pfizer study that Dr. Frank presented the data from, showing excellent results in terms of benefits. And on the left-hand side of your slide are the younger age groups to age 55, and then the ones that I just call more mature because I don't want to call them older. And that's a very personal, selfish reason on my part. So what you can see, if we just look at panel A for the first part of this, you can see that there are two bars in each chart. One is the vaccine and one is the placebo. And if you look at just any kind of side effect like pain at the injection site, you can see that 3/4 to more than 80% of people reported pain when they got the Pfizer vaccine. The green means it was a little bit of pain, and the blue means it was a little bit more pain. If we go over to some of the other side effects, you can see that redness was not very common, neither was swelling. And when you look at the older groups, there were slightly less side effects. And I like to think of it as that we're just hardier when we're older, but I think the truth of the matter is our immune systems are just not quite as strong as we get older. And so there may have been less side effects generated locally. But overall, this was very well tolerated with very few of the severe or grade 4 serious side effects listed in anybody. If we can go to the next slide, what happened in the body. And I just circled a few of the more common things. So you can see again on the left side is the younger crowd. On the right side is the more mature crowd. And what we see here is that fatigue was very common. Headache was very common, and I circled some of those. And that was true whether you were older or younger. And some people had chills, some people had muscle pain, some people had joint aches. And there was more use of people using things like Tylenol or Motrin or Advil or antipyretics to try and help themselves feel better in this study. Overall, again, most of these side effects were what we call mild or moderate, meaning people were able to do most of the things they wanted to do throughout the day, or occasionally take a little bit of medicine to help themselves feel better. We can go to the next slide. If we shift gears and go to the Moderna study product, where again, it looks very similar. Here, if we look at local side effects, we can see that most of it is gray or blue, meaning not very serious, with just a little bit of red here and there. And that's mostly pain at the site of injection. Again, not very much erythema or redness, not much swelling, and a few people had swollen glands near the site of their infection. But of course, it's what we would expect with any vaccine. It's going to hurt when you give it. Next slide. If we look what happened to people in general, we could see that the side effects were more common. I think the most important thing here is that about a little over 50% of the people had side effects with the first dose, but more than 3/4 of the people had it with the second dose. And this is a pattern that we've seen now, that when you get the second dose, it's a little bit harder on people. Now, again, headache, fatigue, muscle aches were the most common things, and some joint aches, some chills. These were the most common things that we saw, most of which was manageable. Oftentimes, these will last a day or two, and then people are fine. Next slide. So if we sort of summarize the side effects of these vaccines, the things that worry people about taking them, especially since we developed them in a pace that is much faster than people are normally used to. The most common side effects are, again, site pain where we inject you, redness, fatigue, headache, and muscle aches. Most of these side effects, again, get to be a little bit more prominent after the second dose, but very few people, far less than 10% of all the people, more than 70,000 in these two studies combined, had any sort of real serious side effect of any kind. There weren't any stops in these two studies. There were no reasons for us to stop. Investigators were asked to watch very carefully, and in these studies, each individual had diaries where they had to report every day everything that they were feeling. And think about all the bad hair days we all have from time to time. Everybody feels a little something. It could have been the placebo sometimes, or it could have been the real vaccine. So I think the important thing to realize is that we were able to accomplish these studies and prove that we have very safe vaccines. Yes, you will have a few achiness, pains, and things like that, but I think it's a reasonable price to pay for getting us out of the pandemic. And I'm going to stop there and I think turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Wood.
Hi. Yes, so thank you, Dr. Fichtenbaum and Dr. Frank, giving a great sort of scientific perspective there. And I'm just sort of to put a human face to what we're doing here. I was motivated I'm a primary care physician, and I had an opportunity to participate in the Moderna study, as Dr. Fichtenbaum mentioned. And just to give perspective, I take care of patients, infants, all the way to from birth to the grave, is what we say. And so in doing so, I am often having conversations with patients about vaccines and what that means and what that holds. And going through this pandemic with you all, we've lost a lot, and having lost personally loved ones and friends, I thought it was important to be able to contribute a little bit more to maybe being a part of the solution. And so that was a part of what motivated me. But I also wanted to be able to have frank conversations with my patients about participating in the study and about what it means to get the vaccine or not. As you mentioned, it was placebo or vaccine. And they do have a picture of me actually getting the vaccine, but the first time I was actually in the placebo group, and I didn't realize that until recently with the unblinding and sort of moving forward. And I will say that even among those, any foreign thing that is going in your body may cause a reaction. I had lymph nodes, and I would have sworn that I had gotten the vaccine, but it was all saline. So I think as you think and about moving forward and learning about the vaccine and hopefully getting that, think about all of the science that has gone into this and really support. So we're still working on in terms of moving through the study. So we want to talk a little bit about why we choose vaccines or not. Next slide. A lot of concerns, and a lot of these have come up in my clinic already, talking to patients and things, is many of the things have been addressed here today. You know, we feel like things have happened too quickly. Is it safe when it happens that quickly? Do we know the side effects? And I think Dr. Frank and Dr. Fichtenbaum have addressed many of those issues today with how the vaccine process has worked and some of the side effects that you may or may not experience with the vaccine. I think the historical concerns are valid in many communities. Part of my motivation as an African American was because in that community, in my community, there's a lot of distrust in medicine and medical science. So I wanted to be a part of the solution and helping to repair that bridge of trust in the system and in the fact that we are really engaged here to want to keep everyone safe and to be a part of the solution. Some people have existing concerns about vaccines already. So like I said, I discuss vaccines in my clinic quite often, and we talk about there's many different myths and other things out there about vaccines. So lots of reasons that people have concerns, but I'm hoping that today we can dispel some of those for you. Next slide. Keep going. So thinking about the COVID vaccine, specifically in September, before we sort of had more of the data that we have now, in September of last year, there was a study that just sort of surveyed various individuals about why they, if they were not going to get the COVID vaccine, why they may not. And the most common was the concern about side effects, which seems very valid, wanting to know how it works, or maybe considering that they don't need it, or worrying that it might cost too much. But I think many of the things, again, today we've been able to address sort of the side effects concern. I personally can speak to some of what, having now got the live vaccine, primarily the pain issue at the site, I think is the biggest thing, thankfully, but it is an injection. Next slide. So the other big thing is how do we address concerns that you may have about the vaccine? And so just moving forward and maybe talking to other healthcare providers or just other folks who may be talking to you is, I think we certainly need to educate people about the vaccines and the benefits of taking it versus the risk of contracting the disease. And that's one of the things we're doing today. More importantly, in practice, I think for healthcare providers especially, is that we listen to what your concerns might be and answer the questions that you have. And I think that's why we've made ourselves available today to be able to help answer some of those questions. And as you've seen today, we've been able to present some of the scientific information regarding the vaccine. So we're going to move on to the FAQs. So, Carl,
I think this is you. All right.
So I think just real quickly, because I was looking at the time there, as far as just to explain to people about herd immunity. So what we're talking about with herd immunity is that if you have enough of the herd immune, then even if a virus or bacteria gets into the community, it really can't spread. And so that we think that we need somewhere around in the 80% immunity level to be able to block the transmission of virus within the community. And so one of the things that people have talked about is, well, you can just let everybody get infected. And the argument I give there as far as that we have still a case fatality rate somewhere around 3%, so that if you have 12 million, if you have 400 million people in the United States, a 3% mortality rate translates to 12 million people. And people don't really think about it that way, but that when you think about, okay, just let everybody get infected and see what happens, that's probably going to mean 12 million people die. And that's not the way I want to get to herd immunity. And so that's why, again, why the vaccine is so important. So I'm done with that slide then, Kelly.
Okay. All right. So when will I get my vaccine? I think this is I used to watch this show. Now I'm going to date myself, the $64,000 question. I think it's like the $64 billion question right now. But, obviously there are 330 million people in the United States, and it really takes time for us to deliver enough vaccine. And so we have to manufacture vaccine. We have to be able to deliver it. And right now the plan has been state by state, each state trying to make their own plans. We know that the vaccines require some type of refrigeration or super cooling or freezing. And in order for us to develop these plans, it takes time to have a place to give people vaccines, to be able to get people in order to get vaccines, and we just don't have enough supply. So we anticipate in the next couple of months that it is very likely that the vaccine from AstraZeneca, the vaccine from Janssen or Johnson & Johnson will also become approved, and that we are going to have lots of vaccine choices and opportunities becoming available to the public. So my anticipation is when we get to the month of February and March, there's going to be a lot more vaccine available. And I think you're going to see during this month a lot of different attempts to make vaccine more widely available to the public as we have gotten healthcare workers vaccinated. So I know there's always going to be some frustration, but when you have a country this large, the third largest country in the world, and you're trying to distribute something to everybody, it takes time. It's not something we can do overnight or easily. Sure, we're human. Sure, we'll make mistakes in this whole process. But I think overall, when you think about this, much like we were able to put someone on the moon, we really came together as a country, scientists, government, business, really putting together a tremendous effort in a short period of time to come up with a solution to a terrible problem, as Dr. Frank has indicated, that could lead to many more deaths and much more suffering in families than we want. So I think we will get this out, and it will happen. And I think the most important thing is stay tuned and pay attention to all of the different websites from our governor and from the state that'll be telling people. And if you don't live in Ohio, then you have to do it in your own state, and make sure you pay attention to that as well, because we know we have plenty of BEARCAT alumni who are all over the country. Next slide.
I got to pay attention. So that so then the last thing here just for kids is that, so just to give an update, a lot of people have said about, well, why do you even need to vaccinate children, is that this is data as of 2 weeks ago, so it's all old already, that there's been over 2.2 million children in the United States that have been infected, and this translates to 9,000 children that have been hospitalized, and unfortunately 179 children that have died. And all of these children really were healthy kids before they got COVID. And then the vaccination, we really need it for two reasons. One, to prevent the disease in the children, but then I think also to try to help decrease the spread of infection. I've been doing pediatrics almost 40 years now. If this virus isn't spread from kids to adults, it's going to be the first virus that I've seen that kids have not passed it, because they're very happy to share the virus with us. Next. I think that's...
So maybe asking, well, if I've had COVID-19, do I need to be vaccinated? And the short answer is yes. And it depends on where you are in your process of having had the infection. We want you to be at least 90 days after your infection. That way you have cleared the infection and your body is ready to now mount a better immune response. We're not sure with actual infection how long your immunity will last, so we want you to vaccinate so that we can preserve immunity as long as possible. Next slide.
So one of the things that has come up in the last couple of weeks are new strains. One thing about viruses is they always tend to mutate. Like anything in life, it's survival, survival, survival. They want to survive, and so they're changing a little bit to see if they can gain an advantage in us. But the good news is, although there are strains that have been discovered in many different places around the globe, and we expect there will be more, that right now our vaccines are still working because of the way that they have been built to withstand minor or small changes. One of the things about viruses, if they try to change too much, they sometimes cause problems in their own survival. So there is always this balance in how much they can really change. So I think for now, the information is that the vaccine will still work. And I think we're getting to the point now where, Kelly, you are up.
All right. So UC and UC Health have been at the front lines of responding to this. So as BEARCAT alumni, just really important that you all kind of know where we're at from a UC and UC Health leadership position on this. We are a research-intensive university partnered with the only academic health system in the greater Cincinnati area. And between the two, we've really had the great privilege to respond to care for our friends and neighbors in our communities. We have now vaccinated almost 7,000 people, and that's first doses. That's not counting the second doses that have already started. We've had to be really thoughtful and intentional about prioritization based on exposure to COVID. So obviously on day one, we didn't have enough supply to meet demand, but we are going to make sure we're committed that everyone at UC Health and all UC employees that are patient-facing and providing that clinical care will be offered a vaccine, and we'll keep going until everyone here who wants one has received one. Also, planning is happening on an hourly basis for coordinated community distribution, working with the Ohio Department of Health. And then there's just some headlines. So we're really proud, and I'm a BEARCAT alum as well, and I'm a proud Cincinnatian from birth. And so it's really exciting to see all of the leadership we've had. The president and CEO of UC Health has actually been serving in an advisory capacity to the Ohio governor, Mike DeWine, and has been really at the forefront and representing our BEARCAT family for all the planning and responding. And truly our clinical trial participation under the leadership of Dr. Fichtenbaum at UC Health has really put us on a national stage. And so we've been really proud to represent all of you in this work. And obviously we have a wonderful jewel in Cincinnati at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center and the leadership of Dr. Frank. And this has been truly a treasure, and they continue to participate in these clinical trials. And so we continue to see advancements and to advance the science of medicine and passionate and compassionate clinical care here in Cincinnati. Just again, some more headlines, lots of things, lots of effort going on to reach all of our family members, both inside the BEARCAT family and out. And just really want to thank all of you for your great support of the BEARCAT family as we continue to spread this message. So key takeaways, we kind of hit on these, kind of busting some myths today. So if you do anything as a takeaway from the presentation and you can bust one myth on our behalf with someone you know, we'd be forever grateful. You know, that yes, the vaccine was developed quickly, but the science wasn't. And these vaccines that are available were tested in rigorous clinical trials. Yes, there are some side effects. As was talked about, this is a normal sign. The vaccine cannot make you sick with COVID-19. The CDC has put out information that every American can get the vaccine and cost is not an obstacle. So if you have questions about that, please do the research on that. And then finally, the vaccine is one of many tools. As we started with slide number 1, we should continue to do the things we know that work until we get that herd immunity that we talked about, and then we'll kind of go from there. But really just want to say thank you and kind of summarize with that.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and I'm so thankful for our panelists today and for all of the attendees. I do believe that we still have a few minutes for Q&A. I see a lot of questions about people wanting to know when will they get their vaccine and how can you sign up. I am aware that in addition to UC Health's website giving a lot of helpful information, Hamilton County also has a website that walks people through a survey where you can let them know your interest, and that is supposed to lead to a prioritization level in the vaccine distribution list. That's at hamiltoncountyhealth.org/COVID-19. I think out of the many multitudes of questions that I see, one of the most prevalent has to do with what about pregnant women that are expecting to conceive in the future? Is there any infertility or fertility concerns? Can one of or more of the panelists speak to that urgent question, please?
Well, I can tell you the infertility, that's just a one-word answer. It's a hoax. And that's in the story. There's no data to suggest that at all. Somebody made that up.
Well, thank you for that short and sweet answer, Dr. Frank. We appreciate it. Any expanding on that from any of the other panelists, or shall we move on?
Yeah, this is Carl. So, I think in terms of pregnant women, we don't have enough data. There were approximately about 40 pregnant women in both of the studies combined, but we need more data on that. But I think what it comes down to is that each woman who is pregnant and in this era should make the decision themselves as to whether or not they want to take the vaccine in it and use it themselves. And that's what we've been advising so far. And we certainly hope in the future to be able to test vaccines. I know Dr. Frank is trying to work on helping to design studies that will test more vaccines in both children and pregnant women.
And so just one thing, just to make sure that that you heard the same thing from Carl and me, is that what I was answering about the hoax is about infertility. That's absolutely false. And I would agree 100% with Carl was saying about with pregnancy, is that while there's no evidence to suggest the vaccine is dangerous for somebody that's pregnant, we would really recommend you talk to your physician so that you feel comfortable with your decision.
Yes, and I'll add that genetic counseling is available at UC Health for people that have additional questions. Another winner in terms of the volume of times this has come up in the chat, how long do you think the immunity lasts from the vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, this is always a tough question for us to understand. So, and it's a very important question. We have data out 6 months from when the vaccines were initially given, and the antibody levels certainly seem very stable, and the cell-mediated immunity seems to be very active. So I think that time will tell. What we really need, of course, unfortunately, is for us to vaccinate as many people as we can and see the virus still continuing to circulate and see if we are still protected from this. So I think time will tell. And if nothing else, like some other vaccines, we may need a booster from time to time. And we will certainly be doing studies to investigate this issue. But for right now, I think the most important thing is that people get very comfortable with the idea that they should be vaccinated, and encourage your friends and neighbors, and have conversations and let them come to speak to experts like Dr. Frank and Dr. Wood and others, so that they can talk through their concerns that may be valid, so we can help people feel comfortable getting a vaccine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fichtenbaum. And along those lines, you mentioned, just getting the shot in the arms of as many people as possible. There's a lot of talk now about foregoing the preserving of the second dose for people and just going ahead and giving that out now with the expectation that manufacturing will catch up. What are your thoughts on there?
I think that's, I would like to get as many shots as many people as possible, and I do think that it'll catch up. It makes me a little bit nervous, but I think that as far as saying we'll put it into everybody and then not have a second dose, but I think that the data would suggest, although it's small, is that if we miss the second dose by, say, instead of getting it 28 days, it's 42 days or 60 days, it is not going to be that the vaccine, the second dose won't work. It's that the only thing that might make it is that you're going to have a little bit longer period before you're fully protected. So I think it's not an unreasonable decision. It's obviously it's a logistical decision. The optimal, we have vaccine drop from the sky for everybody that we need it. But so until we have that, we have to do the best we can.
Another popular question to our experts: what are your recommendations for people with a compromised immune system?
Yeah, so one of the things that's been the history of many vaccinations is that because of the way we develop medications and vaccinations, we tend to be risk averse. So companies want to test this in young, healthy people in general, prove that it works, and then they sort of move on. And we don't always test in special populations. Special populations often include people who have an immune compromised condition or are on special medications that may make it harder for their immune system to respond. Universally, we have always recommended vaccination when we are not giving a live virus vaccine. Let me explain that so people understand. Live viruses are the kinds of vaccines that we give where we have weakened the virus, but there is a possibility that some infection may occur. In general, we shy away from giving those kinds of vaccines. The vaccines being developed for COVID in this country, the leading candidates are all not the full virus. And so I would be very comfortable allowing any immune compromised individual or one who's on medication that may affect their immune system to receive these vaccines. Yes, we won't know if their response will be as good as others, but I think that it's probably no more risky than anyone else getting it. And I think the benefit is likely to be there. We just don't know exactly how much. I'm sure there will be studies of people who get these vaccines and we will measure their antibody levels. But for now, I would strongly recommend that people with immune compromised conditions, that when their time comes, their number is up and they have vaccine available to them, that they go ahead and get the vaccine. Bob, did you want to comment at all?
No, I mean, I think that what I would say as far as that the biggest thing is a lot of times people worry about, is it going to be unsafe? And I would say the answer is we don't have any reason to say it's unsafe. As Dr. Fichtenbaum said, it may not be quite as effective, but even that we're not sure about, but we have no real data to suggest this would be unsafe. So I think the worst thing that would happen is that it may not work quite as well, but it's not going to, we have no reason to think it's going to put you at risk by getting the vaccine.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time. I want to make sure that I do a proper thank you to our panelists, Dr. Wood, Dr. Fichtenbaum, and Dr. Frank. I feel like you all took me back to my medical school days from 96 to 2000 here at the College of Medicine. So thank you for the refresher on microbiology and all those good things. But more importantly, thank you for your work to protect our UC community, our greater Cincinnati community, and the world. You all are exactly what President Neville Pinto and Dr. Rick Lofgren talk about when they talk about Bearcat proud. You all and the work that you and your teams are doing makes us all proud as alumni and as part of the Bearcat Nation. So our hats are off to you. Thank you very much for your service. Kelly, if I'm not mistaken, I think this presentation is being recorded and might even be sent out afterwards, potentially even with this list of questions in the Q&A answered by our specialists. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
All right, perfect. Well, again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees. Russell, would you like to close us out on behalf of the Alumni Association?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Chris, and to our panelists. Great program. As was mentioned, we have recorded this. We will have a transcript of all the questions that came through because we understandably had quite a number. So we will summarize this post-event and send an email out to everyone that registered. Our recording will be available online through the Alumni Association as well. So you should get a post-event email sent to the email that you registered with. We'll try to get that out within 24 to 48 hours once we have the video and have pulled together all of the extra questions that we've had. Just to close things out here, just a few notes about our Bearcats Health series. As has been mentioned, Bearcats Health as a new partnership between the Alumni Association and UC Health and the academic health centers at UC. We have a number of upcoming virtual programs, one of which is Wednesday, January 27th, Mindfulness for Building Resilience with Director of UC Center for Integrative Health and Wellness, Dr. Cotton. You'll have a link in the post-event email that we send to this website with a list of upcoming programs. The Alumni Association has a new online platform called BEARCATS Connect. We launched this back in August, and we hope that all alumni, faculty, staff, and friends of the university will join this platform. It's the opportunity for you all to network, mentor, and grow professionally. You can sign up at alumniconnect.uc.edu. So we hope that you'll do that. So again, thank you to Drs. Fichtenbaum, Frank, Wood, and Lewis. Thank you all for participating and tuning in, and go BEARCATS.